Hello and welcome back to Pappo's Garage. Today we'll be removing the manifold and the EGR of a Fiat Panda 1.3 Multijet diesel. This version is a 2005 model, and this is the offending part in question: the manifold and the EGR, the Achilles heel of this multijet engine. Now, these engines are also in various other vehicle makes. Most notably, the ones that I've seen on YouTube are actually the Vauxhall Corsas combos. And getting the at the EGR and these vehicles looks a lot easier, as you can remove parts around it, like the scuttle panel. On the Fiat Panda, you don't have that luxury. So we'll be going through what I did on this Fiat. The first couple of slides will be of the blue Panda that I've got, because I started recording this video with the GoPro on a head strap, but I required the head torch more than I required the GoPro. I've also, because I've done this in stills, I have added descriptions so you can stop the video and keep it on the screen as long as you need it to without listening to my voice repeating over and over again. I hope that you find this useful. So we'll crack on. First things first is remove the battery. 10mm spanner will do it. Loosen them off and store those cables out of the way. And then remove the securing strap. Now, I snapped this one on the yellow Panda as it was seized. Welded a new bolt back on when I put it all back together again. But yes, remove this strap. Now, the first thing to do with the airbox is to remove the intake pipe. It's just a couple of press-in plastic clips. Both ends, pull it out of the way. Once the pipe's out of the way, we can remove the mass airflow sensor, which is two 10mm bolts. Use a small extension to go get at them. Once this is out of the way, you can also unclip the electrical connector and the Jubilee clip. And then you can remove the air filter box itself, that bit that says Multijet on the top. The two rubber grommets holding it in, just pull up and out of the way. Next is the ECU. These two yellow locking tabs, pull them towards the middle, to the center of the ECU cables, and then you'll be able to release the locking levers, pull the levers out up, and you can pull the cable in out the way. Now, the ECU is connected to the battery tray to the side of it. The battery tray is held on by 3 nuts. 2 are obvious, 1 is inset. Remove them out of the way. Once you've done that, you can get to the 10mm nut that's holding on the earth strap. This is the breather pipe, which goes from the air intake just before the turbo to the back of the engine to a little filter. You'll need to remove these clips because we'll need that out of the way. This goes to the back of the engine. You've got some 10mm bolts holding on various clamps to the top of the engine. Remove this and the little clips that are holding on that conduit. Once they're out of the way, I'd like to just point you to the left hand side where I've just put that new Jubilee clip. That's part of the breather system as well. It's the hidden pipe that you can't see from the back of the engine, but we'll get that in a minute. And now we're going underneath the car. Remember, do not use the jack alone. Always use axle stands. And because we're going underneath the front of the car, you'll need to chop the back wheels. So remember, be safe. So this is the back of the engine. You've got some clips. You've actually got 3 pipes, one coming in that have just been described. There's one at the bottom that leads to the crankcase, and there's another one which is completely hidden, which was mentioned in the previous slide, that you'll need to remove at the far left hand side of the engine. then you come around the back here, you've got a couple of little bolts. These 2 bolts are Torx 30s. They are quite difficult to get to, but it's achievable. And you can also remove the manifold absolute pressure sensor, or the MAP sensor, which is at the back, and it is a Torx 20 self-tapping screw. Also for ease, you've got the vacuum pump cover. I removed it. I suppose some people don't have to remove it, they've got a bit more space, but I found it difficult to work on the engine with that in place. Store it out of the way, you will get a bit of oil dropping out of it. I just cleaned it with a rag and left it, don't touch it. And while you're here, there's a little yellow tab that you can pull, which will disconnect the plug to the EGR, as that is, the EGR is right at the back of the engine, if you don't already know. And then I moved to the underneath the car and emptied the coolant out of the system. You'll need to do this as the EGR is water cooled, so you'll need to take the coolant out into a suitable container. And while you're underneath there, there's the intercooler pipes to disconnect. These were just Jubilee clips. Well, they were bastard clips, but I replaced it with Jubilee clips. Also, that the top boost pipe, I removed this bolt that's attached to the gearbox. It was easier to remove than the one that's further up, as you can see from this picture. And a different angle there, looking up. I said this bolt was a lot easier to remove. And going further up, now with the tray removed, you can see that there is a small 10mm nut, which is securing the pipe to the top of the gearbox. At the other end of the boost pipe, right at the top, next to the manifold, is the 3 10mm bolts that secure the pipe to the manifold. This version on the Yellow Panda is an early version. The other versions are later versions of solid pipes all the way through. And then we go back underneath the car, back to the back of the engine, and disconnect the coolant pipes from the EGR heat exchanger. And an alternate view showing where the pipes go from, but obviously with the EGR removed. With the EGR obviously still on the car, this is the clamp that goes to the back of the manifold. It's a Torx T20. And just to show you, this is the Torx T40 EGR bolt. There's 2 of them, and the arrows point to where they are on the car. They are quite difficult to get to. There's the starter motor right below it. When you get the EGR off, don't forget there is a little shim from the outlet pipe. And here, this is the manifold, just showing you where this awkward bolt is, and this is how I got to it. Once the manifold is off, there is 5 long bolts, all T40s, and 4 short bolts. And this is where the boost pipe goes into the manifold. The arrows pointing to where the EGR outlet is, and that bit at the top there. The pipe comes in from the EGR and then feeds the manifold. That should be conical in shape and full of holes, and also hollow. It is anything but. So we're going to clean that out, clean all of the manifold out, get all the carbon gone and the oil. And I did this with various different ways, with various different successes, which we'll go on to in the next slide. And this is what the EGR pipe inside the manifold should look like after it's been cleaned, sort of. And this is the manifold. Whilst it was being cleaned, I used a couple of cans of Mr. Muscle. it worked to a fashion, but it didn't get rid of all of the carbon and oil build-up. So I resorted to the blowtorch. Just a word of warning, it is plastic, so you have to be careful with how long you leave the heat on. And this is the manifold post-cleaning. I used a drain pipe cleaner, the brushes, the one with the flexible heads. That came in very handy for getting rid of all of the detritus. I did replace the gasket, Victor Reinz 71362090. And now to the back of the engine again. Get past the starter motor, and this is what the back of the engine looks like. They're the ports for the manifold, and that's where the EGR goes, and it still has the metal gasket stuck on. As you can see, it's still quite a lot of carbon there. And then I put the manifold on, and that was only part on. Still got some bolts to put in. The EGR now sat on top of the engine. I replaced the old clips with new Jubilee ones, as they were a lot easier to work with. So this is a shot near the vacuum pump at the side of the engine as I've tried to put the EGR on. The metal gasket's there, the two bolts are in, but I found it very difficult to line it up with the holes on the engine block. And this is a video of me trying to put the clamp back onto the EGR outlet pipe to the manifold. It is very difficult to do. That pipe is flexible. I loosened the EGR manifold pipe, the bit that's actually connected to the manifold, which gave me a little bit more flexibility when lining up the two flanges. I finally lost my patience and got some scrap pieces of wood, and then from underneath the car to the rear of the engine, wedged them between the bulkhead and that flexible pipe, so they would actually mate, the flanges would actually mate up, so I can actually get the clamp on without having to resort to getting another pair of hands to do it. It did help because it kept it absolutely solid while I tightened the clamp up. So once the EGR has been clamped back up, you then start putting everything back in reverse order, pretty much. There is a bleed screw on the heater matrix pipes. Possibly see that when you're connecting the EGR back up. But once it's all back up, I did have trouble starting this because I disconnected one of the fuel lines and I got air in the system causing an airlock. And if that happens, crack off each of the fuel feed lines, so the injectors, and then when you start the ignition, just ignition only, it primes the fuel rail and it will soon get the air out. But it will shoot diesel everywhere. So be warned. Thank you for watching Pappo's Garage. See you next time.